in the name of Prime Minister Modi. And they say that where is the PM candidate from the opposition side? That's been an argument that's been made repeatedly. Now, in the mix of voting for ideology or personality, what weighs heavier on the Indian voter? Well, we are very pleased to have with us the political scientist who, via his books, has delved into this theme. Half Lion, How P.V. Narasimha Rao Transformed India, and Jugalbandi, the BJP before Modi, are some of his books, and they give us an insight into how minutely our guest understands the roles of personalities and ideologies in politics. Please put your hands together for Professor Vinay Sitapati, author and professor, Shiv Nada University. A very warm welcome to you, Professor Sitapati, and may I invite back on stage Shankar Iyer to take this conversation forward.
Welcome, Vinay. We'll try and make this into a conversation. I think this session title has many parts to it, some of which we'll explore over the next 30 minutes. And I would like you to sort of apply a scholarly mind and also your sense of understanding of politics from the books that you've done. So let's start with this idea of identity. And so democracy is celebrated as an exercise of free will, right? Is it truly free? Does public opinion shape politics, or does politics shape public opinion? If I had donned my hat of an economist, I would say, is it a supply side model or is it a demand side model?
Well, in certainly both my books, I argue in favor of the demand side model. So let's take the rise of the BJP, right? That's my second book, Jugalbandi. You know, people go on and on, control of the media, ED Sarkar, CBI Sarkar, etc., etc. But India remains a free democracy, and Mr. Modi's popularity is 70–75%. That's not entirely manufactured, right? Let's look at the underlying basis of that power, which is demand-driven. So I'd encourage all of you, if you have just 15 minutes away from Twitter, to go to just Google Pew, P-E-W, 2019 survey of religion in India. To me, it gives the best description of the society we live in, right? I think the data is kind of out there, but something like 95 or 90% of Indians marry within their own community, right? I forget the exact numbers. That's not in that survey, but that's another survey. That's free will, right? Nobody puts the gun to their head and say you must get married.
That's contestable in the climate of a program that was called Love Jihad. That is contestable whether you marry within your community or not, is free will or not.
No, it's not. I mean, sure. Lots and lots of Indians exercise free will. They marry within. The Pew survey pointed out that large amount of Indians, right, most of their friends come from their religion, right? Most of the people they live with come from their religion, right? But at the same time, they are tolerant to people from other religions. We don't live in Switzerland. We live in India, right? And if you move outside a small cosmopolitan elite in urban areas who speak English, the rest of India looks not so much like a salad bowl, but a bento box. Those of you who know that, which is that these are boxes which separate sort of spaces for different people, and there's tolerance for each other. The data on this is very, very clear, right? A vast majority, something like 75–80% of Indians, they pray once a day. They go to temple or mosque or gurudwara once a week. Now, this is the India we live in, right? So is it any surprise that you get politicians who kind of make an argument on the basis of identity and retail politicians who would respond to the demand to provide certain kind of politics. Like how did we even think that the kind of liberal constitutionalism that is prevalent in Western Europe, if you believe in a true democracy, right, will be reflected in India. Indian politics will reflect Indian society, and we are seeing some urbanization, but endogamy hasn't changed hugely, right? Friendships among people hasn't changed hugely. At the same time, there is an underlying undercurrent of tolerance. So that, at best, we would expect our politics to reflect that.
So, I mean, one can say about this, and this, the audience of this channel will testify to the whole idea of the tehzeeb of Ganga, Jamna, tehzeeb, the merging, the syncretic nature of Indian society. But to go back to your point that
I just wanted to add one more thing. In the Pew Religious Survey, Hindus and Muslims both in that survey were asked, are you okay if your son or daughter marries someone from a different religion? An overwhelming majority of Hindus said no. An overwhelming majority of Muslims said no, right? None of this is a justification. Don't get me wrong. But the first thing we have to do if we are journalists, academics, intellectuals is, what is the society we live in that produces this kind of politics? And of course, there's a lot of dynamic within it. If there wasn't an underlying dynamic, how would you see politicians voted out of power? How would you see prime ministers changing? How would you see people voting on different aspects of their identity at different points of time? So I'm not saying it's static, but Indian politics is demand-driven, and there is a demand for identity politics in India.
So to take that further, then we must brush off some of the blame that we sort of paste on politicians and political parties as being communal or bigoted or whatever, and casteist and all that. So by that logic, the existence of casteist politics in India is also demand-driven, right?
Absolutely. But it's also dynamic, right? To give you a very simple example, someone like Lalu Yadav, in the 1990s, as a product of kind of the Mandal movement, which began, at least in North India, with Karpuri Thakur, who was, given the Bharat Ratna recently, he saw this sort of benefit of Yadav mobilization, right? And mixed that with Muslim mobilization. So definitely, so there is a caste element. There's also an aspirational and social mobility element. But here's the key part. It's not written in stone. Today, Lalu Yadav is a shadow of what he was, right? The ability of Nitish Kumar to mobilize EBCs like Kurmis, which is his community, is also approaching a sell-by date. So just saying that caste, religion, and identity exists in India doesn't mean that, politicians have this fixed canvas on which to get votes. The canvas changes all the time, right? That's why you have the BJP that, had kind of, we all felt that, after the 1990s, the BJP was a 20 to 21% vote share party in India. It's now a 40% vote share party, right? India hasn't dramatically changed. It's just that the dynamics of society that the particular politician has been able to leverage has changed.
So you're now based in Chennai. And there's been no national party has got a foothold in Tamil Nadu since 1967 when they tried to impose Hindi or just a circular got interpreted so. So what explains that? That's casteist, linguistic, religious? What is the basis for the domination of the Dravidian parties in Tamil Nadu?
So let me say something controversial, which is that the Dravidian movement has lasted in India, in South India, in Tamil Nadu, from 1967 onwards, right? From 1967, it has lasted in India, in Tamil Nadu, though it also did pretty well in the early 20th century in the British elections under the self-respect movement. Let me finish.
Yeah, the Justice Party.
Exactly, right? It's not very different from how Hindutva, and this is the controversial part, has become so dominant in Gujarat, right, after the end of the Kham Alliance, the end of Madhav Singh Solanki, and the rise post-1995 of a permanent majority in Gujarat, which has supported Hindutva, right? So to answer your question about the Dravidian movement, is it just about caste and is it just about identity? Let me ask the same question about Hindutva in Gujarat. There is a strong religious subnationalism element to it, right? At the similar in Dravidian movement, there's a strong anti-Brahmin, anti-North element that you see even today when, Stalin's son, criticizes Sanatan Dharma. So that exists, right? The other element of the Dravidian movement, whether you're AIDMK or DMK, is, let me use a contemporary term, Labharti culture, right? Midday meals, right? Welfare schemes. It's not a coincidence that when you go to Tamil Nadu, the human development indexes is one of the best in India, right? So the second element, apart from creating an identity majority, the second element to succeed in India, to create a permanent, is some material benefits. You can call it Labharti culture, you can call it Revdi culture too, right? And third is a strong element of, again, what in today's India we would call capex, which is very visible infrastructure, right? In Tamil Nadu, I mean, the sort of the joke is that if you have to manufacture to be part of the global supply chain in India, there are only 3 places where an Apple phone can be made in India: Gurgaon, Pune, or Chennai, right? And that's because infrastructure in Chennai is excellent. The pro-business aspect is excellent. And so just to, if you look at the Dravidian movement and the permanent majority it has been able to create for so long, yes, you have AIDMK, DMK, but they're actually, Thompson and Thompson, right? They're ideologically very similar parties. It's not very different from the permanent Hindutva coalition that, you have seen in Gujarat over the last 3 decades. And frankly, what the Prime Minister is attempting to do in India today, it's not just about Hinduism, it's just not about Ayodhya. It's also about a certain, muscular nationalism. It's also about, visible infrastructure, and it's also about Labharti and Revdi culture. So it's a kind of a Bhelpuri of all this that creates a permanent electoral majority in India.
So I'll take issue with you on calling what Tamil Nadu does as Labharti. I mean, Labharti is a description of beneficiaries, but I don't think it's freebies. I mean, the midday meal scheme that Tamil Nadu started in 1982 was adopted nationally. It led to the creation of the...
It was adopted nationally by my man Narasimha Rao, but yes, in 90s, yes.
So in 1984, N.T. Ramarao created the 2 rupees rice program in Andhra Pradesh, which became the National Food Security Act. The medical health program in Tamil Nadu, the Amma Canteen program, all of them have become national programs. Now, if we say Tamil Nadu is, sort of has a freebie culture, maybe in the distribution of TV sets or stuff like that, maybe you could call it.
Electricity to farmers is the single biggest part of the budget in Tamil Nadu. Free electricity to farmers. So, Tamil Nadu farmers should buy a Nexon EV. It's free, right?
But the point there on free electricity, Vinay, is that the patent is held by Punjab, which started the free electricity program. And at least I must say that unlike the other northern states, the Tamil Nadu State Electricity Board still generates and distributes electricity. But to get to the point that you made, that identity wrapped in welfareism, how would you characterize BJP's model? Is it Hindutva wrapped in welfare, stroke capex development, or would it be development scaffolded by Hindutva?
Well, I think for the typical BJP voter, they're the same thing, right? Which is that India is rising. Their life is getting better, right? There's an element of their life that is getting better that is seen by the sort of the Ayodhya temple where I was last week, right? It's not a material improvement. There's a kind of symbolic improvement, right? When it comes to, what economists call private welfares, that they'll pay you to build a toilet inside your house. That's a material benefit, but, things are getting better, right? And when India stands up to America when it comes to Ukraine, which is an abstraction. It's a complete abstraction. It doesn't touch any Indian's life directly, right? But what is the message that a BJP voter gets? That things are getting better, right? Now, a lot of people mistake that voters are only interested in roti, kapda, and makan. But Indians don't only think in material terms. They think in spiritual terms. They think in these symbolic terms. They think in terms of identity and religion. And that perfect, Pareto optimum balance is the BJP model. So it's not that, which is the real aspect of the BJP. All of these gives the BJP voter, which is about 40% of India, this idea that things are getting better and things will get even better if they win in a few months' time. So it's all of these that gives this impression that, just a couple of hours ago for a joy ride, I drove from here to Panvel and back on the road, on that famous kind of Sivri-Panvel link road, right? There is a material feel, right? But I'll be honest with you, when I was on that road, I got this feeling that, wow, we Indians can also do it. That's not a material. That can't be measured in 25 minutes. That's not the point, right? It's a feeling that we have arrived. And if you understand the complex way in which foreign policy of all things, boring foreign policy has been weaponized politically by this government, you have to see it in those terms, right? So that finally India has been able to stand up to the white man. It's a very, very important psychological message that this government sends, which is as important as the Ram temple in Ayodhya.
So how much of this is messaging? How much is the medium? I mean, some 10 years back, I wrote that Modi is both the medium and the message. How much of this is the messaging?
Well, so let me ask this question, right? And I keep wrestling with it, as do all of you. How much of it is advertising and how much is the product actually good? This is the question, right? This is another way of asking the question.
Because if you see on the day-to-day roti, kapda, makan life, the states which have consistently voted for the BJP, barring Gujarat, rank pretty badly on the human development indicators, rank very badly on the per capita income indicators. And this whole debate, I thought I saw Dr. Arvind Panagariya here, and his next challenge will be to address the North-South divide question that is coming up in the Finance Commission. So there is that aspect of it, which is why I said how much of this is messaging, how much of this is a promise of a better.
So let me answer this question. Sorry, I'm an academic, so you ask me a short question and I give you the longest answer possible, right? So sorry for that. In the last 25 years, or last 20 years, since about 2000, right, to about 24 years, the scale of growth in India, whether it is GDP growth or Human Development Index, has only one parallel, which is what Deng Xiaoping did to China in the 1980s, right? This is not about Modi, this is not about BJP, right? So notice, I'm talking about the third NDA government, right? Through the UPA years, moving to the second NDA government, right? This also includes, as you correctly pointed out, a lot of states that have nothing to do with the BJP. For example, the transformation of Odisha, nothing to do with the BJP, is phenomenal, right? Any academic I know, I studied at Harvard and Princeton, and as you can know, you throw a stone there and you get an anti-Modi person, right? And I asked them a simple question. I see your point when it comes to many things, but do me a favor, just go to an Indian village and spend 2 days anywhere in India, right? And the modernization that you've seen over the last 20 years, there was a majority of Indians used to use the loo outside till a few years ago, a majority of Indians, right? The use of electricity, the use of phones, these are standard modernization stories. Modi is not only responsible for it. BJP states have done a good job. Many non-BJP states have done a very good job, right? So there is a general story of Indian modernization in the last 25 years. Modi's absolute genius is to be the only face of that modernization story. The modernization is real. Mr. Modi has contributed to it. The DMK has also contributed to it. Naveen Patnaik has also contributed to it. Many factors have gone into creating this modernization story, right? The capex boom in India, many states are able to implement very well, right? Modi is also able to do it, but Modi's singular genius is able to say that all the good things happening in India is because of one man, right? So that's a complex answer because it's not a fraud at all. It's a true story. But that story has many cooks. But there's only one person who's getting the tip, and that is Modi's genius.
So we back to personalities and the messaging. You know, it's often said in democracies that institutions matter more than people. Judiciary, legislature, free press, fundamental rights and stuff. And yet voting intent chases personalities. So in Asia, we've had the Nehru era, the Indira era, the Suharto era, and now, of course, the Modi era. So are people voting for Modi's BJP? Or are they voting for BJP's Modi?
Well, so let me answer your question again in two ways. Modi's personal popularity is much higher than that of the BJP, right? The analogy of this in some sense is Indira Gandhi in the height of her powers in 1970s. After the Bangladesh war, India is Indira, Indira is India, right? But there is a difference. Indira Gandhi's popularity came at the cost of her party. If you all remember, she made it Congress I, right? Modi hasn't made it BJP M. He's not made it at all. His success, his popularity has not been at the cost of the party, right? There are plenty of people in his own cabinet he doesn't like, but he's not able to, or he sees that, you know, he's much bigger than any of them. He has to continue to work with them. Where he can justify, he can ask them to leave, right? He has not split the party organizationally. He hasn't even split the party ideologically. If you all remember Indira Gandhi, what was the reason why she split from the syndicate and created Congress I? It was because she felt that the old Congress, incidentally the Congress of her dad, was conservative. And she was the true Garibi Hatao socialist. So her own party, she accused of being conservative and she split it. Every one of Narendra Modi's ideological projects are the projects of the BJP and Hindu nationalism. Revocation of Article 370 from Shama Prasad Mukherjee's time, they have been screaming from the rooftop, right? Uniform Civil Code, you can say it's opportunism, what Uttarakhand did a week ago, what Assam did yesterday, but again, they have been screaming from the rooftops since Shah Bano, right? Every single thing you talk about ideologically, whether it's CAA or NRC, Advani first thought of this idea in the context of Assam in the 70s and 80s, right? So unlike Donald Trump, Modi has not destroyed his party and gained the populist success. What does this mean? It means that even after Modi, the BJP will remain, it will remain strong, the cadre will remain strong. Yes, it will not have the top-up that Modi provides. There's no question about that, right? But nonetheless, the core of the organization, the core of the party will remain. Let me provide you a contrast with JDU Nitish Kumar. After Nitish Kumar, do you think JDU is going to survive? Answer is no. Let's look at TMC. After Mamta Di, do you think TMC is going to survive? No. So the tragedy in India is that very quickly organizations become the personality cult of one leader, whether it's AIDMK, whether it's Nitish Kumar, whether it's BJD in Odisha. You have to give Mr. Modi credit that he is centralizing power, but it hasn't come at the cost of his party, unlike so many of his competitors at the state level.
Well, that point that he has retained full and total control about the party is as true of him as of Mrs. Gandhi.
Yes.
And he had the additional innovative instrument of the Margdarshan Mandal, which he clicked 75 years. So, you know, that put a lot of the Vajpayee-Advani era people out, principally Mr. Advani.
Yes.
But if you look at Modi, actually his real genius is that he appropriated the Nehru model of national identity, of an idea of India greater than itself. He has taken Indira Gandhi's welfare model and expanded it and executed it in a much greater style. He has taken Rajiv Gandhi's computerization, modernization model and expanded it much time. He hasn't quite got to where Narasimha Rao was in terms of liberalization. I still think that he is much more state-led, but that is also a reflection of the times we live in. So the question that is, let's broaden this beyond Modi. Is the Indian right truly right of center?
Well, so the idea when we say right or right of center comes from European and Western ideas, right?
Well, we work with whatever idea is there.
Or
I mean,
even the idea
somebody has drawn a line at the center and said that whatever, you know.
Yeah, but it comes from the relationship between traditional Christianity and gradual secularization that is happening in Europe. So the idea of are you progressive, are you conservative? I'll give you an example.
No, 1 second. So the standpoint that we should look at it is, what is the relationship of the state and the citizen? What is the social contract that works? Which is where the right of center thinking is.
Yeah, but you know, in India, that has not been the core source of tension. I'll give you an example. In the 1960s, when you have bank nationalization, you know, if the BJP was truly a right-wing party, it would support it, it would oppose it. But actually, Vajpayee supports it. Deen Dayal Upadhyay supports it, right? In my mind, and
which begs the question whether they're right of center or center.
No, so what I'm pushing back is that's not the test of whether you're right or left in India. The right or left center in India is structured around the fact that Hinduism is unique to India and to some extent Nepal. But whether you are right-wing or left-wing has to do with what Indian realities are, right? And I've argued this before many times. But the test of whether you are right or left in the Indian definition is the following. Do you believe that the national movement, the constitution that followed it, and the Nehruvian idea of India truly constitutes India? Do you believe that? Do you believe that there is no such thing as India before the British came? The British came and unified the territory of India administratively. That gave rise to a national movement. The national movement gave rise to the Congress Party, gave rise to the Constitution of India. And it is that idea of India that is the only idea of India and that constitutes India. Is your moral compass the Constitution of India? If you broadly believe this, to me, you are left or left of center, if you broadly believe this. If, on the other hand, you believe that India is thousands of years old.
Or if you believe in the concept of Akhand Bharat from Atak to
Akhand
Katak.
Bharat is a territorial idea, but that civilizationally, that Indian nationalism was not created by British rule, was thousands of years old, and the constitution is a set of laws that governs other smaller laws. But it is not the moral code in India. You tend to be right of center. Right? If your broad answer to these two questions tells you whether you're right of center or left of center or right wing or left wing. This is a descriptive point. Let me add another descriptive point. 99% of Indians do not believe the Constitution of India constitutes India. I'm a lawyer. I now work in a law school. I sometimes feel that lawyers are the only people who have read the Constitution and feel that the Constitution constitutes India. I'll give you a very simple example of this. We all think that central to the constitutional idea of India is the word secularism. Central to the constitutional idea of India. If you're a critic of Modi, you'll say this is what Mr. Modi is changing about the idea of India. Now, maybe 10 million Indians, if speak English as the first language, who would use the word secularism. The remaining vast majority of Indians don't speak in English, don't think in English. What is the word for secularism in any Indian language? Can you tell me? I ask my students this. You're from Tamil Nadu, tell me the Tamil word for secularism. If you're Hindi speaking, tell me the Hindi word for secularism. And the student will think and say, Sarva Dharma Nirpeksh, which is the only people who think that are Doordarshan broadcasters. You know? So now, this is the reality of the constitutional project we live in. That these ideas that form the constitution has not had popular purchase in India. So whatever you say about this tension between the civilizational view of India and the constitutional view of India, I think it's fairly clear today that the constitutional view of India as a popular project has failed. The question about the constitutional or the civilizational view of India is there are many civilizational views. And there is a tussle between which civilizational view will work. So far, the BJP civilizational view is working. I wish it was different when it came to the constitutional values. But I tell my students that good luck with you if you think that India's moral dharma is constitutional dharma, because you are a minority of a minority of a minority.
So we are basically underlying the fact that reason is the real minority in India.
No, I'm not saying reason. I mean, let me push back on this idea. So, okay, from what you've said, I know where you fall, right? Because the underlying assumption is that reason is embedded only in the constitution and not in the civilization.
The argument that civilizational idea of India rests on one view of the civilizational idea of India.
That is correct.
That is because, I mean, you know, all the flows of various cultures and that, you know, the Chinese came to Mauryas, the Maurya dynasty. I mean, you can go through the entire list of what happened. But Vinay, I'm going to sort of...
No, but let me just end one last thing. And therefore, since I feel that at least in the last 75 years, the constitutional idea of India has not had popular purchase, if you are a critique of the BJP civilizational idea, you have to counter it with a different civilizational narrative of India. It is very hard to make the argument that you must counter it through reason and rationality as embedded in the Constitution of India. My students might vote for that idea. I don't think any other Indian will vote.
Well, they're also not voting for Swami Vivekananda's idea of civilizational India, which is the real irony and tragedy of our times. But just to end, one of the persons you wrote about, Narasimha Rao, he's a hero of mine. He's also your hero. I wrote about, when I wrote Accidental India, I had said he's the real architect of reforms. And that was bang in the middle of the Manmohan Singh government. A lot of eyebrows went up and said that you're actually saying that Manmohan Singh was not the architect of reforms, and that view has got accepted over a period of time. Now, Narasimha Rao has finally got his Bharat Ratna, which his party didn't give, this government didn't give for 10 years. Do you think it was political, and do you think that bunching it with a whole lot of other people has diluted it?
Well, you know, I keep joking that I wrote 2 books. The first book, Narasimha Rao, he was the kind of the tragic hero, the Dilip Kumar of that book, and he won Bharat Ratna. The second book was Jugalbandi. It was a relationship between Vajpayee and Advani, but in some sense, I have some sympathy for Advani. He is the Dilip Kumar of that book, and he won the Bharat Ratna. So if you're nice to me, maybe I'll write a book about you, and maybe you'll then get the Bharat Ratna, right?
That depends on whether I want that thing or not, but who are you writing about next? Who's the next Dilip Kumar?
No, I'll have to find out the next loser of history, basically. But it's very interesting that you asked this question, because in some sense, the problem that Narasimha Rao faced explodes on the national stage when this gentleman here breaks the story about India, gold from India, being sent to the Bank of England in Sahar Airport. So Google this. There's a photograph, breaking story in the early 90s in Indian Express. He's the man who broke that story, right? I definitely feel that Narasimha Rao is the best Prime Minister India has had, for the simple reason that not just was the scale of transformation extraordinary, right? I mean, he invented the welfare scheme, what I talked about at the national level. Midday meal scheme, employment guarantee at the national level, he's the man who invented it. He's the man who understood that if you have to fund large-scale welfare schemes, the government has to get out of the business of business. He understood that link. He changed India's foreign policy towards the West after the collapse of the Berlin Wall. He's the father of India's nuclear program. I didn't say that. Atal Bihari Vajpayee said that when Narasimha Rao died. You'll have all the juicy details in my book. But that's not why he's the best Prime Minister in India. He's the best Prime Minister in India because he was able to achieve this with 1/10 the power that Narendra Modi has. He's a man who famously had the charisma of a dead fish, extremely boring guy, right? His party hated him. He only became Prime Minister because the person who would have become Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, died in the middle of the election. And by virtue of being the least ambitious man in the party, he became Prime Minister. right? He had to report in some sense to Mrs. Gandhi. And in parliament, the Congress government he ran was a minority government. The two governments before him, both minority governments collapsed within a year. The three governments after him, also minority governments, collapsed in roughly a year's time. The fact that the man was just able to survive as prime minister for 5 years is astonishing. That he used those 5 years to transform India, to make the set of ideas that were heretic before he became prime minister into common sense, such that every prime minister after him and most state chief ministers operate within the logic of Narasimha Rao, is testimony to why he should have been given the Bharat Ratna much earlier. I think it's a mistake that the Congress didn't give it to him. And certainly there is some politics about why the BJP wants to kind of needle the Congress, saying you didn't give your man, I'm giving your man. Plus they want to kind of resurrect a Telangana icon. So there are local politics. There is a dilution in giving it to two other people at the same time. But that it is richly deserved, other than politics, is 100% true.
His beauty was really that the man operated a completely minority government where his party was not with him. He could speak about 9 languages, and the joke was that he couldn't take a decision in any of them. But he had the courage to actually go ahead and say, not taking a decision is also a decision. And when you look at that kind of transformation, and now you look at a 300+ seat government and the challenges that they face, you realize how much he has sort of, it was a complete leap of faith what he did and transformed India. So thank you, Vinay. This has been a good conversation.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. What a lovely conversation. May I please have on stage Dhruvo Mukherjee, CEO, ABP Private Limited.
I think you should give him one more round of applause. We never know which Bharat Ratna is going to write about.
Thank you for that very passionate conversation. One that I'm sure will continue off the stage as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Professor Vinay Sitapati. And thank you very much, Mr. Iyer, once again, for chairing this session.
ABP News, आपको रखे आगे.